watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country. Now, here's your host, former Alabama All-American, Mike Johnson.
Hey everyone, and welcome back in. A special Thursday edition of Roll Tide Daily. You guys know that I'm all about these Thursday editions of Roll Tide Daily. We've got some Throwback Thursday videos coming our way in a little bit of a notch onto what we talked about yesterday in terms of running backs that didn't win the Heisman Trophy at Alabama. You know what that music means, man. Let that music run for a little bit. That's some good stuff right there. I'm telling y'all, that's the best intro on internet shows anywhere. So talking about some of that stuff moving forward at Roll Tide Daily right here is always going to be a good time. My name is Mike Johnson. I am the host of Roll Tide Daily. I appreciate you guys joining back in with us here on this Thursday episode. Already weighing in the comment section, getting a bunch of RTRs and Roll Tides. Appreciate you guys jumping in with us. Reminder, if you will share the show on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you need to share it on Twitter, SEC Country Alabama. We're going to have a good time talking Alabama football for the next 30 minutes. Well, obviously, you guys can already see with the teaser up top on a lot of these things. We're going to jump into Lane Kiffin here in a little bit. We're going to get to some interesting comments that Jeromy Pruitt had about Nick Saban. Christopher Walsh always talking about negative recruiting from around the SEC. We're going to get into that. And also finishing up a little bit of this week with the SI.com Top 100. They get all the way down to the top 10 before they cut it off. So we're going to talk about that as well. I do want to mention the question of the day. If you guys remember, yesterday we talked about Bama running backs and we talked about quarterbacks earlier in the week, quarterbacks for opposing teams. Today, we're going to go a little bit off topic. We're not going to talk about Bama players. We're not going to talk about Bama coaches. We're going to talk about a former assistant. The question of the day today, should Lane Kiffin be given another opportunity to be a head coach in the SEC? That's Lane Kiffin, who you guys know greatly, was the offensive coordinator for Alabama for 3 years under Nick Saban, won a national title, went to the playoff 3 times, now the head coach down at Florida Atlantic. His name came up a ton last year in terms of the Tennessee opening. Should Lane Kiffin get another opportunity to be a head coach in the SEC? That's going to be our question of the day, and I hope you guys will continue to chime in on that. Dean Mitchell already weighing in. Roll Tide Mike still on vacay here in Pensacola Beach. Love me some Pensacola Beach, man. Grew up, born and raised down there in Pensacola Beach, so I hope you're enjoying it down there. Without further ado, though, let's get rolling on this crazy topic number one. Now, I don't love talking about Lane Kiffin. I'm like a lot of Alabama fans when it comes to Lane Kiffin. It's like sometimes I wish he'd go away. Had a chance to meet him. Very nice to me. A little bit of my background with Lane Kiffin. The first time I ever noticed Lane Kiffin when he was the head coach of Tennessee back in 2009. You guys remember Mount Cody and the Cody block, and then some people call it the Rocky block. It really, it's been on the Daniel Moore paintings. Lane Kiffin was the head coach of Tennessee back in 2009, if you guys remember. They were jumping up and down the sidelines. They had Eric Berry. They had a number of really good players over there for Tennessee that year. Lane Kiffin, kind of a mediocre season. During the middle of the night, kind of jets off to the airport. He's offered the USC head coaching job, calls it a dream job, darts out of Knoxville after 1 year. Remember, he took over for Philip Fulmer up in Knoxville, so darts out of Knoxville after 1 year, middle of the night, gets a police escort to the airport, heads off to Los Angeles, California to be the head coach down at USC. Now, this comes back up because some interesting comments Lane Kiffin had on Marty Smith's America podcast with ESPN. He is asked about some of his coaching veneers, being the head coach at Alabama, going back to Knoxville, being, the head coach at Tennessee. What did the Tennessee fans think of him? What was that experience like heading back up to Neyland Stadium? Here's the interesting comments that Lane Kiffin had to say about him kind of heading back into to Knoxville and being part of this Alabama football team. It's crazy. They were literally talking about like a bulletproof vest. I'm like, come on, guys, this is football. They said, no, really. They had security with me the whole way, even walking on the field and stuff like that. He goes on to say, I'm not wearing a vest, guys, all right? It's a little bit over the top. It was all in fun. There was a lot of mean words said, 4-letter words. That speaks of Tennessee fans, just how passionate they are, just how passionate they are. I think Philip Fulmer said it the other day. We have the most passionate fans in the country. Talking about those Tennessee fans right there and talking about some of the things Lane Kiffin had to deal with in his time up there in Knoxville. I think that's one of those interesting comments to kind of get. Listen, I don't love Lane Kiffin, but a bulletproof vest? Are we being serious right now when they're talking about the security of Lane Kiffin? You've been to the away stadiums, right? You Alabama fans have seen Bama kind of a walk in Neyland or walk in Starkville, walk in Oxford, Mississippi, kind of have that away game walk of champions going on. They wanted Lane Kiffin, obviously, to wear a bulletproof vest while he's headed into the stadium. Now, that conversation with security, I don't know if there was ever a threat. I don't know if he received some kind of death threat or somebody said they were going to shoot him. But that, to me, talks about Lane Kiffin, his time at Alabama, his time at Tennessee, and just how tumultuous, I guess, the relationship is with Tennessee fans. Some Tennessee fans last offseason were talking about, hey, maybe Lane Kiffin would be willing to take back over the Tennessee program. He did a lot of good things, did a lot of bad things, embarrassed Tennessee at times, but evidently, for some of them at least up there in Knoxville, there's not a lot of love lost. Talking about Tennessee, talking about Alabama, talking about how those guys really feel about Lane Kiffin. I think it's really interesting to kind of look into that. My personal feelings on Lane Kiffin, I think it was extremely underrated as Bama's offensive coordinator. I think he should get more credit for some of the things he did. We talk about Saban all the time, really evolving in terms of being a head coach, in terms of offensive philosophy from what Jim McElwain was to what Doug Nussmeier was to what Lane Kiffin was. Remember, this is back in a time where Nick Saban's asking the question, do we really want to run no-huddle offenses in college football? Do we really want to speed it up? Do we need a 10-second clock in terms of how much time we should give the defense to get set? Then goes out and hires Lane Kiffin to kind of turn that corner at Alabama. I think he's very underrated. He did some incredible things. Remember, Blake Sims was a running back for some of his time at Alabama, goes on to be the single-season passing leader, for one of those years back in 2014 under Lane Kiffin as the offensive coordinator. So I think he's a little bit underrated. I think that Lane Kiffin, like I said, I don't think there's any love loss up in Tennessee, but I think there is some love loss, back there in Tuscaloosa. Listen, I got to ask all Alabama fans this question. If at times last year you wanted to replace Brian Dable with Lane Kiffin, I know I went through that thought process at times saying, hey, if Lane Kiffin had been the offensive coordinator, Jalen Hurts would probably have progressed a little bit more. I had that own question in my head. Now, I'm glad he's gone to Florida Atlantic. I think that Brian Dable did a fine job. Bama won the national title last year. Now they're going to try to move on with that with Michael Locksley, and I think that's going to be a great marriage to move forward to, but you can't diminish what Lane Kiffin was as a head coach or what Lane Kiffin was as an offensive coordinator specifically. Now, didn't work out at USC. It's like I said, he winds up at FAU, so continuing with the question of the day, should Lane Kiffin be given the opportunity to land back in the SEC as a head coach? I think it's going to be interesting to follow along with some of you guys. Michael Lloyd said in Tennessee, I believe it. Jay Wright said, really, who would want him? I can point to a couple. Now, we're going to get to this later in the show. I'm going to continue to read these comments, read these questions, talk about the question of the day. I'm going to get to that later in the show. I've got some ideas for you guys lined up at the end of the show who I think could come calling for Lane Kiffin at the end of the year if he continues to have the success at FAU that he did 1 year ago. Remember, he goes down there and wins the division. Now they're going to play Oklahoma to kind of start the year off, so he's going to be in the spotlight a ton. He's going to continue talking about Nick Saban and that reputation playing under Nick Saban and all those talking points that go along with it. Another guy who is a Tennessee head coach who has recently been talking about Nick Saban, what it's like to kind of coach under the dictator. Remember, Lane Kiffin's talked about this a ton. Jeromy Pruitt is one of those guys that has jumped on recently with Jocks over in Birmingham, our good friends over at Jocks 94.5 FM over there in Birmingham. He jumps on with these guys on the three-man front, Cole Kubelik, Aaron Suttles, their new show over there in Birmingham. And he had some interesting takes in terms of what he thinks about what it's like to coach under Nick Saban. You remember when coaches and players get asked, hey, what's it like playing for Nick Saban? What's it like coaching for Nick Saban? People say, hey, listen, he's tough, but he's fair. You know, some people like to call him the Nicktator. We've talked about that a ton on that show. I've used that term to kind of describe Nick Saban and his philosophy. Jeromy Pruitt taking a little bit of the high road, though. I think this is really interesting to look at, not only for Jeromy Pruitt's past under Nick Saban, but this is really, really cool to look at in terms of what the future holds for Tennessee football and Jeromy Pruitt. Here's Jeromy Pruitt after he is asked what it's like coaching under Nick Saban down there at Alabama.
You know, I don't think there's anything that's tough about it. The one thing about Coach Saban is everybody in the building's role is defined. He has a standard that he wants everybody to excel to, and he sets the pace. You know, he's not one of these guys that, you know, he's going to ask you to do something that he's not willing to do himself. So, I had an opportunity to work for him for 8 years, learned so much about organization, about football in itself, and I could sit here and talk for a week about the things that I learned from him, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity that he gave me.
Now, if you guys listen just like I did, I think the interesting comment is hey, not tough at all. There's some organizational things. He expected a ton of his assistant coaches, but really, I think what Jeromy Pruitt's outlining there is the attention to detail under Nick Saban's staff. There's never a question of, hey, what's my job, right? There's never a question of what am I expected to do. How hard am I, supposed to work? How hard am I expected to work? How hard do I need to recruit? Because Nick Saban's always going to lead the way. Nick Saban's going to outwork everybody in the building. Nick Saban's going to outwork the players. He's going to outwork the assistant coaches. I've been asked about this a ton. I've been asked about what it's like playing under Nick Saban. I've been asked, what it's like to, the assistant coaches. I've always said that Nick Saban's actually harder on the assistant coaches than he is on any player he's ever coached. It comes down to, hey, I'm going to yell once at the player if they mess up. I'm going to yell 3 times at the assistant coach if that player in their group messes up. The offensive line misses a block. He gets yelled at one time. That offensive line coach is going to get absolutely thrown under the bus. I think this also sheds light, too, on what Jeromy Pruitt's going to be expecting of his staff up in Tennessee, of his players up in Tennessee. I think Jeromy Pruitt understands the minute details that become really a huge part of running a program, right? Jeromy Pruitt was under Nick Saban for 7 to 8 years, really coming from Hoover High School as a defensive coordinator. I don't want to say Nick Saban made Jeromy Pruitt what he is, but he had a huge hand in elevating him to where he's at right now. Remember, Jeromy Pruitt leaves for a couple of years, goes to Florida State, goes to Georgia, comes back to Alabama once Kirby Smart's hired over there at Georgia, and then ends up with the head coaching job at Tennessee. And obviously, he's off and running up there, and he's got one of those things where he's trying to round that football program into form. I think the attention to detail and outlining what the assistant coaches are really expected to do is one of those great things that Jeromy Pruitt can probably carry over from his time under Nick Saban. Remember, this is the Nick Saban that comes from the Bill Belichick coaching tree. Everybody always talks about the Patriots, right? Do your job written on the wall, everybody's job specifically. Now, that doesn't mean, hey, go block that guy, or hey, go block this guy. It's down to the minute details. This is what it's like playing for Coach Saban. It's not, hey, go block that guy. It's, hey, use your right foot right here, put your left foot right here, put your head right here and your eyes right here, and if you do all that, then you will be blocking that guy. And I think it's so interesting to kind of give people a peer into, what really, it's like playing for Nick Saban, coaching under Nick Saban. I think that Jeromy Pruitt can be an absolute threat up at Tennessee. If he carries over that attention to detail, I think that's going to be a really huge thing to watch for moving forward in terms of what he's able to do. Now, he is going to be one of those guys recruiting against Nick Saban, right? He's going to be on the recruiting trail. They went head-to-head for a couple guys last year. J.J. Peterson, one of them. They were also Jacob Copeland, who ended up going to Florida. Quay Walker, who ended up choosing Georgia. Head-to-head in a lot of these different circumstances. They have a lot of crossover in terms of the people they know, recruiting tactics, so it's going to be interesting to watch those guys go head-to-head. I say all that to bring up an article that our friend Chris Walsh at SEC Country brought up yesterday. Now, he writes an article. He wants to go into detail about how, hey, negative recruiting from be it former Bama assistants, be it other coaches in the SEC, just seemingly not working. We have a quote to show you from Christopher Walsh, the article he wrote yesterday, who I think tells you a little bit about what everybody thinks around the SEC, this negative recruiting that everybody's trying to pull over on Nick Saban. This is Saban's short-circuiting talk of age. It's about the only way opponents can negatively recruit against Alabama anymore. Yet this year in particular, it may be backfiring. Saban has revamped his coaching staff and is putting together another star-filled recruiting class. Plus, he also has a very easy counter to the age question. He goes on to say in this article, he isn't just the dean of SEC coaches. He's the only one with a strong job security. Among the schools that now make up the SEC, keep in mind Missouri and Texas A&M didn't begin playing league till 2012. There have been 30 coaching changes since 2008. And I think that's such a big thing to talk about, right? All these coaches are bouncing in saying, hey, Nick Saban might not last. He might retire. He's getting old. The attention to detail is not there. Guess what? Nick Saban's been around twice as long as just about anybody else in the SEC. We covered this a couple of weeks ago, right? We had the graphic to show you guys. I think we have it lined up right here from USA Today that really highlights the coaching changes. Now, keep in mind, those are two different numbers. They don't include all the coaching changes of Missouri and Texas A&M who did show up in 2012. 27 coaching changes right here since the time Nick Saban's arrived at Alabama. Listen, we can talk all we want to about what Kirby Smart is at Georgia, what Jeromy Pruitt is at Tennessee, Will Muschamp, Jimbo Fisher, even Ed Orgeron down at LSU about the negative recruiting. But the bottom line is this. Nick Saban has the number one recruiting class in the country right now by any measure. And not only that, it's by a long margin. Now, I do think it's fearful when you look at Jimbo Fisher and what he's able to do. Auburn obviously going to have some success under Gus Malzahn. Georgia, you have to worry about if you're making it to the SEC championship game. Jeromy Pruitt, to me, still has a long way to go on the recruiting trail. But that really is, I think that's a great thing to kind of highlight from Christopher Walsh at SEC Country. All these guys trying to really take shots at Nick Saban. Hey, listen, they're not having any fun over there. Well, guess what? Nick Saban's gone out and said, you got the boat video that's going out. We covered the paintball video with Josh Jacobs a week ago. Hey, guess what? We're having fun. These recruits, you're not able to connect with Nick Saban and Alabama staff on social media. Guess what? Nick Saban gets 6 new assistant coaches. Scott Cochran, all the new assistant coaches all over Twitter. They're putting out graphics. They're talking about NFL, the hashtag why not Bama, hashtag rolling in 19. I think that kind of exemplifies what we're talking about here in terms of Saban really being able to move on, evolve, right? Get these new coaches in, Craig Kulikowski, Pete Golding, Josh Gaddis, Coach Banks, Brent Key continuing to be on Twitter. We mentioned Scott Cochran yesterday on the Cochran video of the week. He's getting things pumped up. Getting that social media presence really has been a big thing moving forward for Alabama staff. He's continuing to evolve. Christopher Walsh is just kind of highlighting that. Listen, the negative recruiting is just not working. You can go out there and talk about Nick Saban, talk about retirement age. Christopher Walsh highlights the fact that, hey, listen, if you sign on the dotted line, you might have to play 4 years. You might have to play 5 years under Nick Saban. Does Nick Saban stick around till 72? Well, guess what? Obviously, he's not slowing down anytime soon. I think the attention to detail that Jeromy Pruitt was highlighting is greater than ever under Nick Saban. I think it's going to be something interesting to watch here in the coming months, really, and probably the coming years as some of these people start to close in on what Bama is. Malachi Morgan saying being a first-round draft pick and playing for Natties would seem pretty fun to me. Definitely seems pretty fun to me. Corey Weatherly weighing in saying SEC means Saban ex-coaches. Rena Hayes saying RTR. Ron Hall Jr. saying most former Saban coaches have gone straight to the other SEC or high-level programs. Lane didn't. I think that speaks to his character, not abilities. We will dive into that for sure here coming up in a little bit. A lot of you guys have a lot to say about what Lane Kiffin is and whether or not he should get another shot in the SEC. I'm telling you, I've got a couple of opportunities I think that he's going to probably get in the SEC, if not this year, coming up in years to come. I think that he's going to land back in the SEC probably sooner than a lot of people think he is. William Lee saying, Pruitt isn't stupid. Don't bite the hand that fed you and might feed you again. Listen, you always hear the saying, right? Be nice to the people you see on the way up because you might see them on the way back down again. I think that's definitely something Jeromy Pruitt tending to keep in mind. You guys keep those comments coming in. Just a little bit of a reset. My name is Mike Johnson. This is Roll Tide Daily. We're on every Monday through Thursday, 1 o'clock Eastern time. Please, if you get a chance, share the show. Send the show to your friends. Text it, tweet it, do whatever you got to do to make sure we're coming in this comment section and making sure that people are following along Roll Tide Daily, getting the conversation going. Remember, this is June 21st. I think the countdown's right at around 70 days until Bama kicks off against Louisville. So we're going to continue having the conversation going and talking Bama each and every Monday through Thursday. Rena Hayes saying Kiffin needs to shut up and sit down. Listen, I don't mind. Lane Kiffin gets a bad rap for me. I don't mind Lane Kiffin talking now, as long as it's not negative against Alabama, because don't bite the hand that fed you. All that conversation going on. Michael Lloyd says, I've seen far younger coaches looking more fragile than Nick. He's not going anywhere. I agree with that. This guy still plays basketball. He still looks young. He's still healthy. He still eats a salad every day. Gets his oatmeal cream pies. I think that Nick Saban's not going to stop rolling anytime soon when you talk about what he's able to do over at Alabama. Now, I do want to dive a little bit back in the conversation we've been having all week. If you remember, along the way, we've talked about SI.com really releasing their top 100 players for Alabama, or not Alabama football, for college football heading into 2018 season. We've highlighted Jerry Jeudy and Najee Harris got left off the list. Yesterday, I think we had Damian Harris, we had Isaiah Buggs, Tua Tagovailoa. Right there at number 51, Dylan Moses. If you guys remember, that's where the list cut off, right? They went 51 through 100. Dylan Moses last on the list. I had a problem with where Tua was. I had a problem with where Damian Harris was. Obviously, I've got my crimson glasses on. Anytime you're putting Shea Patterson and Jordan Ta'amu in front of Tua Tagovailoa, I think that's going to be an interesting dynamic to look at. Well, SI.com continues to go into that kind of player spectrum in terms of who's going to be on this list. Bama added a couple more to the list on this last edition. Now, I got to be honest with y'all. This is 50 through 11, right? I think these are the three best players on Alabama's football team. Raekwon Davis sitting there at 28, the defensive tackle, obviously had a heck of a stretch run. As you get through that Clemson game, as you get to that Georgia game, really wreaking havoc up front. I made the point that Raekwon Davis really is going to be a big part of what that secondary is able to do. If he's able to use his length and his power up front to really establish wreaking havoc in the backfield against those opposing offensive lines, it's going to be a long year for those opposing passing games if Raekwon Davis, Anthony Jennings, Christian Miller, Terrell Lewis, all those guys up front are able to continue doing what they want to do. Sitting down there next at number 19, Mack Wilson, the linebacker. Now, this guy might actually be the most talented guy on the roster. Now, he doesn't have a huge long line of lineage and playing experience, but I thought he played great last year. Obviously, dealt with a few injuries, but nobody's ever doubted what Mack Wilson will be in the long run in terms of this Alabama football team, what he brings to the table. Rolando McClain actually going on the record a couple days ago saying, hey, listen, I was in the building. I challenged Mack Wilson in the national championship game. He goes out and does more things than I ever expected him to do. There he is trying to reach for that touchdown against Clemson. You guys remember that pick six he had, that defensive touchdown. Now, we get down to number 12, and obviously this is a list after my own heart. You're talking about offensive linemen, and that's Jonah Williams sitting there at 12 at offensive tackle. We mentioned last week, right? Jonah Williams was number 4 on some of the big boards, going to the NFL draft coming up for next year. Mel Kiper's listed him. A couple other people have put Jonah Williams really in that first round, that top 10 draft pick realm. Well, here he is landing at number 12 on the list of college football players coming up in 2018. I think he's going to be spectacular in terms of what able to do. He's started every game at Alabama so far. Remember, he left halfway through the national title game against Georgia, but he is a presence that Alabama needs. He's a presence that Alabama wants. Nick Saban absolutely loves this guy. He's my kind of player. Keeps his mouth shut, does what he's supposed to do, kind of a hard-nosed type guy, buries people into the ground, and he's going to continue to perform at a high level. There he is, number 12 player in college football according to SI.com. Now, what's interesting about this is SI.com still hasn't released their top 10 list as far as college football players go. Had me scratching my head, right? Who could possibly, be from Alabama and be in that top 10? The question is, I don't think anybody. I think that Bama's probably going to get shut out of this top 10 list from SI.com. The only other player that didn't get any love that I could think of is Ross Piercebaker, and while I love him, I don't know if he's going to land in the top 10 as far as SI.com goes, but we will see and keep y'all updated moving forward on that list. Now, I think, in my opinion, this list is going to look a lot different when the season's over. Sports Illustrated, probably coming back in the postseason top 100 list. I think you're going to see Tua move up a ton. I think you're going to see Damian Harris move up a ton. I think you're probably going to see Jonah Williams even move up into that top 10. Raekwon Davis to me, no doubt about it. All these guys are probably going to be at least top 50, if not top 20 and top 10 by the time the year is over. Michael Lloyd kind of weighing in the comment section. What about Jalen? Matt Merle asking, why isn't Williams in the top 5? This list blows. No, I tend to agree with that. I think that when you get to the postseason, I'm telling you, Jonah Williams, some of the other big guys really in the middle are going to be on this list, and they're going to be really making a lot of noise as far as those postseason lists go. So I think that's definitely something to keep our eyes on. Now, this is the current list of players, right? This is Alabama's players that have already signed on the dotted line a couple of years ago. They have already gotten the development. They've gotten under Scott Cochran. They've been part of the special teams. All those guys on the list have national championship rings. We do have a little bit of somber news to report to you guys, though. Jordan Davis, you guys remember from the 2018 signing class, the 4-star signee from out of Memphis, was a huge recruiting battle going over this kid. It's kind of an edge rusher, an outside linebacker. One of those guys a lot of programs wanted. Well, it turns out, according to Rivals.com yesterday, Andrew Bones reporting that Jordan Davis is not going to be able to make it to Alabama during this recruiting cycle. We got his tweets, I think, from yesterday to pull up and show you guys. Really kind of a somber deal. There he is, in his earlier tweet at 5:14 p.m. yesterday saying, so many let me down, learn my lesson now, gives the okay sign, and that's 2 days ago. And then obviously on the 20th of June right there, very late at night, true fans, Bama fans, 100, stay behind me all the way. And that's Jordan Davis obviously pointing to the fact that he's not going to be able to land in this signing class this year. Now, it is interesting. First of all, he's heading over to the old Last Chance U, the East Mississippi Community College, trying to get his grades back up under him, do whatever he has to do to qualify to land on Alabama's campus in a couple of years. A couple of names for you guys that probably remember some people that have gone through this. Quentin Dials, one of these guys, has been in the NFL for, I think, 4 years now. He's one of those guys that, did not qualify, had to go to junior college, has to circle back, has to be a part of a later signing class. Also, Dion Blue is one of those names that a lot of Bama fans will remember. You have to, really go back for some of those guys that have been extremely successful, but there are a couple of them. And so, obviously, we're wishing Jordan Davis the best in terms of what he's able to do. A lot of you guys weighing in. David Hardy saying Mac is the truth, talking about Mac Wilson landing on SI.com. I want to scroll back down. I still want to revisit the Lane Kiffin scenario that we presented as being the question of the day. James Curry weighing in says, why not let Lane in the SEC again? Never be a dull moment. Now, I'm just telling you guys. Now, I'm not saying this is definitely going to happen, but there's a couple of schools that jump out to me that could possibly hire Lane Kiffin at some point. First of all, let's talk about where he'd be the scariest, in my opinion. Lane Kiffin showing up down at LSU. A lot of people are going to say, man, LSU would never hire him. LSU fans will say they would never hire him. Remember, this is who Ed Orgeron sold to the Booster Club, to the AD Joe Oliva down there as coming in as being his offensive coordinator before he took the job down at FAU. They were ready to hire him as an offensive coordinator. I think with the offensive problems they've had over the last 10 years, you're probably going to go an offensive coach this next time around if it's not if it's not a guy like Dave Aranda getting the job, the defensive coordinator. I think he could land at a place like LSU. Another place I think that he could probably get an opportunity, let's look up at Missouri. Let's look up at the fact that they hired Derek Dooley as their offensive coordinator this year. Barry Odom, to me, his seat is going to be burning by the end of the year. He reeled off 6 straight wins this past offseason, but I don't think that's going to get him any farther than 2018. I think that anytime you talk about him, I don't know that he gets past one of those places. Now, listen, you're also going to have the question about Auburn, about Gus Malzahn. You're going to have the questions about Ole Miss. You're going to have the questions about Matt Luke over there, the interim coach that gets his deal. Listen, Terrence Brandon weighing in too, saying Lane can go. Ole Miss, Vandy, Kentucky, maybe so. I'm just telling you, I think right now Mizzou, LSU kind of top my list, with possibly Ole Miss being one of those teams you can mention later on. David Hardy saying, I agree with the LSU comment. He would be scary with that talent down there. Absolutely. Matt Merle saying Lane at Mizzou, wow, that would be a show. Absolutely would be a show. And that's a Mizzou team that really needs some good news heading through this football season. It's going to be interesting to see what they're able to do with their football program this coming season. Now, that is the question of the day today. Appreciate all you guys weighing in. Everybody's got a thought on Lane Kiffin, right? What he was at Alabama, what he can be in the SEC for years to come. Yesterday, we talked about running backs in the show, right? The best non-Heisman winning running backs from Alabama and Alabama history. We had the graphic to show you. This was, according to Christopher Walsh, Trent Richardson, the Doak Walker winner, did not win the Heisman Trophy. Sean Alexander was number 3 on the list. But our buddy Bobby Humphrey, I don't know if he got a lot of love in the comment section yesterday. So this being Throwback Thursday, right? We had to dig into the archives and find you guys a video to kind of bring out. And I thought, listen, what better to do than to go back and show people just how good Bobby Humphrey was in an Alabama uniform. I think it's interesting to pull this clip out. What popped out to me, 1987 from this clip back on YouTube. That was actually the year I was born. So Bobby Humphrey's doing this only a couple of months after I was born. Here's Bobby Humphrey and his run against Penn State that obviously a lot of you Bama fans will remember. This goes down in Bama history right here. Check this out.
Penn State changing its front, going to an off. It is Humphrey cutting back in a tremendous hole as he breaks free. Bobby Humphrey loose. They won't catch it. Bobby Humphrey breaks a tackle and carries it in for the evening's first touchdown.
What a run. What a tremendous run by Bobby Humphrey.
You just got to love that right there. Now, if you guys are like me, I'm like the younger generation of Alabama guys. I remember seeing this video all in the Traditions pregame video. You see there with Tyrone Prothro and Freddie Roach and all those things. This play gets a lot of love, and it should. This is the play, obviously, Alabama against Penn State back in 1987. Look at those moves from Bobby Humphrey right there. What a heck of a run. What a heck of a time to look back at Alabama football and really what Bobby Humphrey meant to the program. He was the oldest guy on the list yesterday, and in terms of a lot of people we were talking about, wanted to make sure he got his love. We're looking forward to what he meant for Alabama football. Obviously, thank you guys for joining us today. All of you guys are still remain in the comment section. Matt Merle saying, I love this show. It took a while, but I'm glad it's here. Absolutely. I love doing this show too. Trust me, this is my favorite 30 minutes of the day. I hope this is you guys' favorite half hour of the day as well. If you like SEC Country Live, and I know I see our buddy Shannon Burgess over there in the YouTube comment section, continue to watch SEC Country Live. I'll be on at 3 o'clock Eastern time later on this afternoon on the SEC Country Facebook page. Myself, Brandon Adams. Actually, Brandon's not in today, so it'll be me against Brandon Walker again. We'll continue to bring you all the latest and greatest. I will be back on Monday, though, for Roll Tide Daily at 1 o'clock Eastern time right here on the SEC Country Alabama Facebook page. Please continue to share the show with your friends. We love having the conversation. Love talking about Lane Kiffin and Bobby Humphrey and Nick Saban and Jeromy Pruitt and on down the list. So you guys have a great weekend. I'm going to do my best to have a great weekend. And until I see you guys on Monday, Roll Tide.
You've been watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country.